last week on Legally Kidnapped.
Good evening. Our top story this week. In Washington, D.C., a recent review reveals that the child protective industry is snatching kids from their parents without adequate cause or justification, and fathers are suing D.C.'s child protective industry after their children were removed from their mothers and they, being innocent, were not given the chance to take custody of their children, instead having to fight like hell for the right to do so. In Illinois, the Catholic Diocese of Peoria agrees to cut all foster care contracts with the state because of the gay rights fiasco and transfer all staff and resources to a new nonprofit organization that is not affiliated with the Catholic Church. Florida makes a mad dash in the race to see who can sell the most kids after ending the state's gay adoption ban, which has now spurred the start of 100 new adoptive families, and a record number of gays and lesbians are applying to become the new parents of your stolen children in South Florida. In Arizona this week, Governor Brewer launches a child safety task force to address the multiple child protective industry failures regarding the deaths of children over the last 6 months, claiming that she wants to ensure that all children get the help they need. And the Department of Economic Security chief of Arizona promises to make changes in the way complaints of the child protective industry are handled, planning to cut the time it takes to complete an investigation to 40 days instead of the typical 178 to 203 days it takes for CPS agents to get the job done now. In New Jersey, residents in a South Jersey neighborhood are expressing concerns over a troubled youth group home that is set to open after a video of a violent fight at another facility owned by the same people has been making its way around town. In Nebraska, the parents of sick children are taking the kids to school no matter what after the state implements new truancy laws where the parents could even lose custody of the kids. In California, a new report on the educational outcomes of foster children is released, highlighting low graduation rates and lower grades than their peers. And California regulators determined that Los Angeles County CPS agents did not break the law by housing the children who they stole in a Wilshire Boulevard waiting room. In Connecticut this week, foster youth advisors are seeking to somehow reunite biological siblings who have been separated while in the foster care system. 37 laid-off CPS agents make a special plea to the governor to try to get their jobs back. And the Connecticut child protective industry manages to make modest gains in regards to the number of people being suckered into becoming foster parents, but still fails to reach the goals outlined in a federal court settlement from a 1989 class action lawsuit. Child poverty rates are surging in Michigan this week, as the state tries to cut off all cash assistance to anybody who has been receiving benefits for 4 or more years. In Rhode Island, child welfare advocates are praising a new law which protects foster kids from identity theft. And thanks to a new law, child neglect is officially a crime in Maryland. Children who are shy are now being targeted by shrinks for psychiatric drugs under the new label called social anxiety disorder. The director of the National Child Protection Training Center thinks that we can end child abuse in 3 generations. President Barack Obama signs the Child and Family Services Improvement and Innovation Act into law. The state of Washington can't hire enough foster parents to house all the kids they've been stealing. West Virginia won't let people over 65 become foster parents. And Pennsylvania takes disciplinary action against 73 licensed professionals in the month of September 2011 alone. In Sweden this week, the child protective industry is targeting homeschoolers. More and more moms are snatching the kids and hightailing it to Mexico these days. In Ireland, 2 kids who were taken from New York without their father's consent after a divorce decree will be allowed to stay in that country. And an anti-abuse television commercial has been banned from Irish Airways for gender bias because it did not show a woman beating a child, but only a man. In Australia this week, the Victorian Parliament launches a full-scale investigation into the Catholic Church's handling of sexual abuse by priests. And a Senate inquiry continues into forced adoption practices in the 1960s and 70s in hospitals run by the Catholic Church, with a mother testifying about being forced to give up her baby to those monsters when she gave birth as an unwed 18-year-old back in 1969. In Canada, a judge rules that the antidepressant Prozac could have been a factor causing a teenager to commit murder, and a foster mother from Saskatchewan is going to stand trial for the murder of a 22-month-old in her care back in June of 2010. In England this week, the big focus is on black children in foster care who are 3 times less likely to be adopted than white kids. The Prime Minister promises to address what he calls the scandal of thousands of youngsters left languishing in foster care and change the rules so that more black kids can be adopted into white families. This after the whole country is upset that only a whopping 60 babies were adopted in the UK last year, and British journalist Christopher Booker responds to this by saying that the real scandal remains the ever-increasing number of children taken taken from their parents in the first place. A woman who was sexually abused by her foster brother is suing London Council for not doing anything to prevent the abuse. A British CPS agent is in hot water for losing the suicide note of a teenager who was found dead only 4 weeks later, which prevented her from getting any help. And a new study reveals that children are the main cause of anger among motorists, causing more road rage incidents than any other factor in the UK. In entertainment news this week, Terminator 2 star Edward Furlong is accused of not making his child support payments. The daughter of actor Billy Bob Thornton gets 20 years in jail for aggravated manslaughter in regards to the death of her goddaughter. The television show Sesame Street plans to introduce a hungry Muppet in order to teach kids about poverty. And MTV's Teen Mom star Amber Portwood is rushed to the hospital for a severe panic attack, saying that she's still suicidal and that the only reason that she lets the father keep custody of their 2-year-old daughter is to keep Child Protective Services off their backs. In New York, a former CPS agent gets 5 years probation for failing to act in a child neglect case. A foster mother from Oklahoma is convicted of killing a 2-year-old in her care. A couple from Washington pleads not guilty in the death of a little girl from Ethiopia who they adopted. A foster parent from North Carolina is on trial for the murder of a foster child. A foster father from North Dakota pleads guilty to shaking a 2-month-old baby in his care. And a 70-year-old man from Michigan who was a foster parent for 4 decades was convicted on 10 counts of sexual assault. In North Carolina this week, a hospital is about to change its policies on ratting parents out to the child protective industry after losing a $25 million lawsuit for failure to report child abuse. 2 parents from New York who attempted to rescue their 8 kids from the foster care system waive extradition in Pennsylvania and head back to New York. And in Pennsylvania, the parents of a sick child say that a hospital and county CPS agents falsely labeled them as child abusers. The state of Washington agrees to pay $4.6 million after failing to protect 2 children who were abused by their parents. And finally tonight, a former foster child from Indiana finally finds her real mother after 50 years of searching. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK, over and out.